My father died 3 weeks ago. At the funeral, my brother told everyone, the company now belonged to him. He said my father left me nothing. I stayed quiet, because I knew something, he didn't. My father was many things, strict, proud, careful, and if there was one thing he never did, it was leave loose ends. My brother thought he had already won. He thought the papers were signed, the deal was done, the company was his. But he missed one detail, and that detail changed everything. My name is Daniel Whitmore. I'm 63 years old, and for most of my life, I believe my father built his company for both of his sons, not equally, not emotionally, but fairly. That was the word he cared about, fair. My father, Richard Whitmore, founded Whitmore Industrial Supply when I was 12 years old. In the beginning, it was nothing more than a dusty warehouse, 2 metal shelves, and a used delivery truck that rattled so loudly you could hear it from half a mile away. He sold industrial parts to small machine shops and repair companies. Bearings, seals, hoses, fittings. The kinds of things nobody notices until something breaks and a factory line goes silent. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady, and my father trusted steady things more than flashy ones. By the time I was in my 20s, the business had grown into a respectable regional company. We had a real office, a warehouse twice the size of the first one, a fleet of trucks, and clients all over the state. I joined full-time when I was 26. My younger brother Michael never really did. That distinction matters, because Michael loved the title of businessman. He just didn't care much for the business itself. He liked nice suits, fast promises, polished speeches, and dinners with people who said words like expansion and leverage. I liked numbers that balanced, orders that arrived on time, employees who got paid every Friday, and customers who came back because we didn't disappoint them. My father noticed all of that. He never said it directly, but I saw it in the way he handed things off over the years. Warehouse operations went to me, vendor contracts went to me, payroll approvals, client disputes, inventory forecasting, late-night calls when something failed on a shipment, all of it came to me. Michael got special projects, business development. That usually meant he disappeared for 2 weeks, came back with expensive lunch receipts, and one half-finished idea about scaling aggressively. Still, he was my brother, and because he was my brother, my father kept trying to make room for him, second chances, third chances, positions with vague responsibilities and good salaries. I used to think that was kindness. Later, I realized it was guilt. My father loved Michael, but he didn't trust him, and Michael spent most of his adult life trying to prove he deserved what he had never earned. That tension sat between all three of us for years, quiet and heavy and unspoken. Then my father got sick. At first, he insisted it was nothing serious. Fatigue, chest pain, a bad cough he blamed on the weather. But the truth came fast after that. Lung cancer, aggressive, too advanced for optimism. Once the treatments began, everything changed. Michael started showing up more often. That should have comforted me. Instead, it made me suspicious. For years, he could barely make time for a quarterly meeting. Now suddenly he was in the office twice a week, bringing coffee, volunteering to drive our father to appointments, sitting in conference rooms he had avoided for a decade. At first I thought maybe illness had finally pulled something honest out of him, but honesty was never Michael's habit. Performance was. One afternoon, about a month before my father died, I walked into his office and found Michael standing beside the desk while my father signed a stack of papers. I stopped in the doorway. "What's all this?" Michael looked up too quickly. "Just some authorization forms," he said. "For what?" "In case Dad needs me to step in while he's recovering." My father didn't look at me. That bothered me more than the papers. I walked closer and saw the logo of our corporate attorney at the bottom of one page. Why wasn't I told about this? Michael smiled, the way he always did when he wanted to make someone sound unreasonable. It's temporary, Daniel. Relax. I looked at my father. He finally met my eyes and said, I don't have the energy for arguments today. That was all, no explanation, no invitation to sit down, just dismissal, so I left. But I didn't forget, after that day, Michael's confidence grew. He started speaking to department managers as if decisions already belonged to him. He changed the format of our Monday meetings, requested updated client lists, and once even asked accounting to give him direct access to pending receivables. They refused, not because they distrusted him, because every major approval in that company still went through me. Michael hated that. You could see it in the way his smile tightened every time someone said, "You'll need Daniel to sign off." My father died 11 days later. The funeral was held on a gray Thursday morning under a cold wind that seemed to move through people rather than around them. There were more attendees than I expected, employees, old customers, suppliers, former neighbors, even a few retired drivers who hadn't been on payroll in years. My father was respected. He had earned that. Respect doesn't come from speeches. It comes from showing up, year after year, and doing what you said you would do. After the service, people gathered in the hall beside the chapel, speaking quietly, drinking burnt coffee from paper cups, sharing stories. I was standing near the back when Michael stepped into the center of the room and tapped a spoon against his cup. That got everyone's attention, and then he did exactly what I should have known he would. He made my father's funeral about himself. I just want to say, he began, voice heavy with staged emotion, that Dad trusted me to carry Whitmore Industrial Supply into the future. A few people nodded politely, then he said the sentence I still remember word for word. Before he passed, he made it clear the company would now be under my leadership. There it was, not grief, a public declaration, a claim. My hands tightened around the coffee cup, but I said nothing. Then Michael added, some people in the family may not like that, but Dad knew who had the vision to grow this company. That was meant for me, not subtle, not accidental. A small silence passed through the room. A few employees glanced in my direction. I stayed quiet, because while Michael was busy performing victory, I was remembering my father. Careful men do not hand over everything in a hallway conversation and a few rushed signatures. Careful men leave structures behind, systems, safeguards. They don't leave loose ends. And if there was one thing my father had been his entire life, it was careful. The next Monday, Michael arrived at the office in a navy suit, a new watch, and an expression that belonged on a man twice as successful and half as competent. He walked straight into the executive conference room and called a leadership meeting without asking me. I went anyway. So did our operations manager, our warehouse director, our head of purchasing, and Diane from finance, who had been with the company longer than either of us. Michael stood at the head of the table and placed both hands on the polished wood like he was about to announce a merger. As of today, he said, I'll be restructuring several departments. We need to modernize fast. Leaner operations. More aggressive growth. Diane folded her hands, under whose authority? Michael smiled and slid a folder across the table. Dad signed transitional control documents before he passed. He looked at me when he said it, not because he expected me to object, because he wanted to watch me do it. I opened the folder. The documents were real: temporary executive authority, expanded signing access, authority to review and redirect vendor relationships, authority to initiate strategic sale discussions with outside buyers. That last line hit me hardest. Sale discussions. I looked up slowly. You're trying to sell the company. Michael didn't even bother denying it. I'm exploring options. This company isn't for sale. It might need to be, he replied coolly. Dad knew that. That was a lie. I knew it before he finished the sentence. My father would rather have shut the doors himself than let Michael turn 40 years of work into a quick payout, but legally, the documents gave Michael just enough room to create chaos, not final control, not ownership, just enough authority to look legitimate while moving fast, and that was Michael's specialty: move fast, pressure people. Create the illusion that everything is already decided. After the meeting, Diane stayed behind, so? She asked quietly. I looked again at the documents. There, at the bottom of the final page, beneath the attorney's seal and my father's signature, was a reference line to an operating agreement amendment, Schedule C, attached, except it wasn't attached. I flipped the pages again. Nothing, no Schedule C, no amendment, just the reference. One missing detail. At the time, Michael either hadn't noticed it, or thought nobody else would. I closed the folder, and for the first time since the funeral, I smiled. Because if there was a Schedule C, then somewhere there was a condition, a limitation, a lock on the door Michael thought he had already opened. I looked at Diane and said, "Don't let anyone sign anything today." She nodded. Then I took the folder, walked back into my office, and called our father's attorney. That was when the real fight began. The attorney's name was Harold Benton. He had handled Whitmore Industrial Supply's legal work for nearly 20 years and had known my father long before that. He was the kind of man who still wore cufflinks on weekdays and believed silence was more useful than most people's opinions. His assistant said he could see me at 4:30. I arrived at 4:20. The folder with Michael's authority papers sat on the chair beside me like something alive. Benton read every page slowly, without interruption. He didn't frown, didn't nod, didn't ask questions. He just read. Then he turned to the final page, tapped the reference line with one finger, and said, "Well." That single word was enough to steady me. "There is a Schedule C," I said. "Oh yes," he replied. "There most certainly is." He stood, crossed to a filing cabinet, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out a thick binder. After turning several tabs, he removed a single stapled packet and placed it on the desk between us. Schedule C. I read the first paragraph once, then again, and this time I did smile, because Michael had missed exactly the detail that mattered most. The temporary transitional powers granted by my father were valid only so long as no action was taken to sell, transfer, pledge, or materially alter ownership of the company without unanimous written consent from both voting family officers. Both, not one, and the named voting family officers were listed directly below: Richard Whitmore, Daniel Whitmore, not Michael as alternate, not Michael with provisional authority. Michael could review things, he could speak loudly in meetings, he could pretend, but the moment he moved toward an actual sale or ownership transfer, his authority stopped cold unless I signed in writing, and I never would. Benton looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Your father anticipated a problem." "Yes," I said quietly. "He did. What would you like to do?" I leaned back in the chair and thought for a moment. Michael was expecting confrontation. He liked loud rooms, panic, and pressure. He knew how to perform strength when people were emotional and confused, so I decided not to give him any of that. "I want to let him keep talking," I said. Benton's mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile, that can be useful. "It will be," I replied. "Especially if he oversteps." And overstep he did. Within 3 days, Michael had already contacted 2 outside buyers. Diane quietly forwarded the emails to me. He called them preliminary strategic conversations and told them Whitmore Industrial Supply was entering a new leadership chapter. He even implied that a majority-backed transition plan was underway. There was no majority, there was no transition plan. There was just Michael, wearing confidence like a disguise and hoping it would pass for authority until the ink dried somewhere. I told Diane, our warehouse director Pete, and Benton the same thing: document everything. No arguments, no scene, just paper. Paper wins. By the following Tuesday, Michael called another leadership meeting. This time he entered with a printed proposal, glossy charts, and enough fake certainty to fill a theater. We've received serious interest, he announced. An acquisition would position all of us very well. Pete leaned back in his chair. Who's all of us? Michael ignored him. He kept talking about liquidity, market timing, valuation multiples. The kind of language men use when they want greed to sound like wisdom. Then he slid a term sheet onto the table. Nothing final, he said, but I want everyone aligned before we move. I picked up the term sheet. There it was: buyer name, proposed valuation, asset purchase structure, timeline, and at the bottom, a space reserved for executive approval. Michael watched me carefully. Well? He asked. I set the paper down. You can't do this. His smile didn't move. Actually, I can. No, I said. You can't. The room had gone silent. Michael glanced around the table, sensing something shift but not yet knowing what. I reached into my briefcase, removed a copy of Schedule C, and laid it beside his term sheet. I spoke to Benton. That changed his face immediately. Not much, just enough. He picked up the document and scanned the first page. By the second paragraph, his jaw tightened. By the final line, he stopped pretending. This wasn't attached, he said. It didn't need to be attached to exist. He looked at me with open anger now. Dad gave me transitional control. Yes, I said evenly. Temporary operational control. Not authority to sell the company. Michael turned toward the others in the room. This is a technicality. Diane was the one who answered. No, she said. It's a restriction. Pete nodded once. Big difference. Michael's composure cracked. He pushed back his chair and stood. This is unbelievable. I'm trying to move this company forward. You're trying to cash it out, I said. He pointed a finger at me. You always did this. You kept Dad close, made yourself indispensable, and shut me out. That accusation might have landed once, years earlier, but not anymore. I stood too. No, Michael. Dad gave you chance after chance. You shut yourself out every time work became harder than talking. He stared at me, breathing hard, then gathered his papers and left the room without another word. The following morning, Benton filed a formal notice revoking any interpretation of Michael's powers beyond daily administrative assistance, citing Schedule C and the attempted external sale contact. By noon, every senior employee had a copy. By 3 o'clock, the buyers had backed away. By 5, Michael was no longer taking calls. I should tell you that was the end of it. It wasn't. Men like Michael rarely stop when they're defeated. They escalate. That Friday, I came into the office to find 3 department heads waiting outside my door. Michael had spent the morning telling people the company was unstable and that major changes were coming. 2 employees from accounting were in tears because he had implied layoffs might happen if people chose the wrong side. That did it. The sale attempt was one thing. Threatening employees who had given their lives to the company was another. I called Benton again. He listened for less than a minute before saying, "Bring me the operating agreement." I did. 2 hours later, We found the clause my father had buried like a final lesson: any officer acting under temporary authority who materially harmed business continuity, client confidence, or employee retention through unauthorized representations could be removed immediately by the remaining voting family officer, me. My father really had thought of everything. Monday morning, Michael walked into the building and found his keycard deactivated. I was waiting in the lobby with Benton and Diane. Michael looked from one face to the next and knew instantly, "What is this?" Benton handed him the notice. Michael read the first paragraph and laughed once in disbelief. "You're removing me?" I answered before Benton could. "No. You removed yourself." He looked at me with pure hatred then, not brother to brother, just man to obstacle. "You think this makes you dad?" "No," I said. "It makes me responsible." That word landed harder than any insult could have, because responsibility was always the one thing Michael could never wear for long. He crumpled the notice in one hand. "This company will bury you." I shook my head. "It survived you." Security didn't need to touch him. Pride carried him out faster than they ever could. After that, the building felt different, lighter, quieter, not happy, exactly. We were still grieving my father. I was still grieving him, but grief without chaos is at least honest. Over the next 6 months, we stabilized operations, renewed 3 major client contracts, and quietly undid nearly every reckless idea Michael had tried to push through. Diane became Chief Financial Officer officially. Pete took over logistics entirely. I stepped into the role I had already been doing for years, only now without interruption. One evening, long after everyone else had gone home, I sat in my father's office with the blinds half open and the warehouse lights glowing in the distance. On the desk was the original copy of Schedule C, one detail, that was all Michael had missed, one line and one attachment to one agreement. Most people think big betrayals are dramatic, explosive, obvious, but they're not. Most betrayals depend on small assumptions, that no one will read closely, that no one will ask questions, that confidence can replace legitimacy. Michael thought my silence at the funeral meant defeat. It didn't. It meant patience, because I knew something he didn't. My father never left loose ends, he left structures, and in the end, that was the difference between us. Michael wanted control he could announce in a room. My father trusted the person who would stay late, read the documents, protect the people, and keep the company alive when the speeches were over. He trusted me. Whitmore Industrial Supply still stands today. My brother doesn't work there. He tells people he left because he wanted other opportunities. I let him tell that story. Men like Michael need stories. The truth is usually too small for their ego and too heavy for their hands. My name is Daniel Whitmore. After my father died, my brother took the company, but he missed one detail, and that detail cost him everything.